Leila gripped the pregnancy test, her fingers cold and unsteady, as she watched the 2 pink lines appear. No, this couldn't be real. One night, just one night, and her life had just been upended. A reckless decision had brought her here, standing in the bathroom, about to face a truth she wasn't ready for. She needed to find him. But would he even remember her? If you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I'll be sharing another story just as crazy as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let's get into it. 3 weeks ago, she was just another struggling interior designer in Seattle, working double shifts at a coffee shop to pay rent on her tiny studio apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. And then came that night. The one that had seemed like an escape from everything. Nicole had insisted she get out, take a break from the grind, go to a party. The champagne was flowing, the music was loud, and Leila, who usually kept to herself, had let her guard down. She'd met him there, Ethan Wilder, a man who didn't belong in her world, tall, confident, and clearly out of her league. They'd talked about everything, art, life, dreams, and just for a night, Leila had felt seen. When the night ended, she never expected to hear from him again. After all, men like Ethan didn't stick around for women like her. And yet, here she was, clutching a pregnancy test that seemed like a cruel reminder of that night. A night where one fleeting decision would change everything. She sank onto the edge of the bathtub, the weight of her future pressing down on her. How could she be pregnant? And with twins, no less. Ethan had been distant that night, but she hadn't expected him to ignore her existence after, let alone ignore the life they'd created. She needed to tell him. But how? Would he even remember her? Would he care? She wiped away a tear, then stood up with a new resolve. There was no turning back now. She had to find Ethan Wilder. She had to tell him the truth, no matter how terrified she was. Leila's hands were trembling as she pulled out her phone, the screen lighting up with a sea of missed calls, texts, and notifications. None of them mattered. None of them felt as urgent as the one thing that loomed over her head. Ethan. She needed to find him. But how? Her thoughts spiraled in every direction. She didn't even know if Ethan would remember her. Their night together had been filled with passion, yes, but how much of it had he truly seen? They'd shared a connection, sure, but had it been a fleeting one for him? Had he moved on the moment she left his hotel room? She had to believe that. At the very least, he deserved to know. The first step was figuring out who Ethan Wilder even was. Her fingers hovered over the keys as she typed his name into the search bar. She knew he was successful. She had gathered that much from their brief conversation. But she had no idea just how successful. When she hit search, her stomach dropped as articles began to load. She clicked on the first link that mentioned him. Ethan Wilder, CEO of Wilder Enterprises, one of the biggest names in sustainable technology in the Pacific Northwest. Billionaire, Harvard graduate, visionary. A part of her wanted to throw the phone across the room, but another part of her clung to it, trying to make sense of the situation. A billionaire? She swallowed hard. What was she even doing? Trying to approach a man who probably lived in a world so far removed from her own. She had barely scraped by to make rent some months. Ethan was a world away from everything she knew. But none of that mattered now. She was pregnant, with twins, and whether Ethan fit into her world or not, he had a right to know. Leila closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. What was the next step? She could call him, right? He must have a phone number listed somewhere. But how would she even begin? What would she say to him? Her nerves threatened to undo the fragile resolve she had mustered. She spent the next hour scrolling through articles and clicking through various corporate profiles. There had to be something, some link that would lead her to him. A personal assistant? Maybe there was a publicist or someone else who could help her reach him without looking desperate. Then it hit her. The company's contact page. There it was, buried at the bottom. Ethan's assistant, Patricia Chin. There was a phone number. With shaky fingers, Leila dialed the number. She didn't know what she expected to happen. Maybe someone would pick up and tell her to leave a message. Maybe she'd be redirected to voicemail. But what if she actually got through to someone? What would she say? The phone rang 3 times before a crisp professional voice answered. "Good morning, this is Patricia Chin, how can I help you?" Leila's heart began to race. She could hear the smooth professionalism in Patricia's voice, and it made her feel small and out of place. She cleared her throat, trying to sound as confident as she could, given the circumstances. "Hi, this is Leila Williams," she started, her voice catching. "I was hoping to speak with Mr. Wilder. It's a personal matter, though." Patricia didn't say anything for a moment, and Leila held her breath, unsure whether the silence was a sign of disbelief or disinterest. "Mr. Wilder is very busy," Patricia said finally, "but I can take a message for you. What is it regarding?" Leila swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. There was no easy way to say this. "It's about something personal, Tay," she repeated. "Something important. I need to speak with him about a situation that involves him. I'm pregnant with his child." The line fell silent again, and Leila almost panicked, thinking she might have said the wrong thing. But then Patricia spoke, her voice still calm, though there was a change in her tone. "I'll need to confirm some details with Mr. Wilder, but I'll make sure he receives this message. Can you please leave a contact number and I'll have him get back to you?" Leila hesitated. This wasn't how she had imagined this moment. She wanted to tell him herself, face to face. But Patricia wasn't going to give her that chance. Not yet. So she gave her number, even though she knew the uncertainty would only grow as she waited. "Thank you," Leila said, her voice barely a whisper. "I really appreciate it." "You're welcome," Patricia responded, the line clicking off. Leila stood in the middle of her small studio apartment, the quietness settling around her like a thick blanket. She had done it. She had made the first step. But now there was nothing to do but wait. She tried to distract herself by moving around the apartment, sorting through her paintings, cleaning up a little. But it all felt meaningless. The weight of what she had to do still hovered over her. Her stomach churned with nerves. She hadn't even told anyone about the pregnancy yet. Not even Nicole. She hadn't figured out how to tell her friend the truth. It was all too overwhelming. By the time evening rolled around, Leila had barely touched her lunch or dinner. She hadn't heard back from Patricia. She thought she might break. But then, Just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Leila, this is Ethan Wilder. I received your message from Patricia. I'd like to meet with you as soon as possible. Please let me know when you're available. Ethan." The words hit her like a wave. She dropped her phone on the couch and sat down next to it, her hands shaking. He had actually replied. After everything, after all her fear and doubt, he had responded. But what did it mean? Was he angry? Curious? Indifferent? He wanted to meet. Leila quickly texted back, trying to keep her composure. "Thank you for getting back to me. I can meet you tomorrow, anytime. I'd prefer if we could talk privately." Her fingers hovered over the screen, but she hit send before she could second-guess herself. It was done. She had initiated it. She had taken the first step, and now the moment of truth was coming. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. She barely slept, tossing and turning as her mind replayed the situation over and over again. She tried to prepare herself for every scenario. What if Ethan denied everything? What if he didn't believe her? What if he didn't want anything to do with her, or worse, the child? But there was no answer to these questions yet. Not until she saw him. Not until they were face to face. The next day, she woke early, the nerves still lingering. She dressed in something simple but professional. Nothing too flashy, nothing that would make her seem out of place. She spent a little extra time putting on makeup, but she hardly recognized the woman in the mirror. She looked older, worn down, but there was something else there too, a quiet determination, a strength she hadn't known she had until now. She left her apartment, took the bus downtown, and made her way to the coffee shop where they had agreed to meet. As she walked through the familiar streets, she realized she wasn't just preparing to meet Ethan. She was preparing to change her life forever. She entered the cafe a little early, ordering a cappuccino to steady her nerves. The cafe was cozy, with exposed brick and soft music playing in the background. It wasn't too crowded, but she still felt like everyone was watching her. Minutes later, the door opened with a soft chime. And there he was, Ethan Wilder. He was dressed in a sleek navy suit, looking every bit the powerful businessman. Yet something about the way he walked into the cafe seemed different, less distant than she remembered. As he approached, their eyes locked, and for a moment, everything else in the room seemed to disappear. He stopped in front of her, offering a polite smile, though his eyes betrayed his uncertainty. "Leila," he said softly, his voice surprisingly warm. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Leila nodded, her throat dry. This was it, the moment she had been dreading, and yet it was here. It's good to see you," she managed, though it was a lie. Her heart was racing, her palms sweating, but she held his gaze. Ethan sat across from her, his eyes scanning her face as if searching for answers. He didn't speak right away, and the silence between them grew heavy. Finally, he leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. "I'm assuming this isn't just about the pregnancy, is it?" Leila took a deep breath, the words she had rehearsed so many times in her head, suddenly feeling foreign. "No, it's not. It's about us, about what happens next." Ethan nodded slowly, his jaw tightening as if preparing himself for something difficult. Leila felt the weight of the moment settle between them. This was it. There was no turning back now. Leila sat in the cafe, her hands clasped tightly around her cup, the heat from the cappuccino barely registering in the chaos swirling inside her. Ethan sat across from her, his eyes intense, though not unfriendly. The tension between them was thick, and for the first time Leila wasn't sure what to expect. This wasn't just a conversation about a pregnancy anymore. No, this was about something far bigger. About two people who were about to have their lives completely altered. "I want to be clear, Leila," Ethan started. His voice even, almost too controlled. "I didn't come here just to learn about the pregnancy. I came because, if this is real, if I'm really a father, I need to understand what this means for both of us." The words hit her harder than she expected. Father. That single word echoed in her mind, stirring a deep fear that she couldn't shake. What if he wasn't ready? What if he didn't want to be involved? She could raise this child on her own, but it wasn't the future she'd imagined. Still, she wasn't about to let him dictate what came next. Not without hearing him out first. "I understand," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But you have to know something first. I didn't come here to make demands. I'm not expecting you to drop everything and solve all my problems. I'm just here to make sure you know the truth. You deserve to know." Ethan nodded slowly, leaning back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "So, what now? What happens next?" Leila looked down at her hands, a fleeting thought of what could have been running through her mind. The world felt so different now, the weight of their reality settling in her chest. She had known this conversation wouldn't be easy, but it felt like they were standing on the edge of something uncharted. But she had to do this, for the sake of the child, for herself. "I'm still figuring that out," she admitted, taking a deep breath. "I'm not sure where to go from here, but I do know that this child deserves both of us to at least try. I'm not asking for anything from you. I just need you to be a part of in this, in whatever way that makes sense for you. I can't make all the decisions alone." Ethan's expression softened for a brief moment, his lips pressing into a thin line. "I've never been good at relationships. Not the personal kind." He paused, his gaze dropping to the table for a moment. "And being a father, that's something I never thought I'd be. My life's been about my work, building wilder enterprises. I never made room for anything else." Leila listened, her heart tightening at the vulnerability in his words. He wasn't like the other wealthy men she'd encountered, untouchable, aloof. There was something raw about Ethan in this moment, a glimpse of the man beneath the cold, professional exterior. But could he really be a father? Could he truly open up to the idea of raising a child together? Especially when their lives were worlds apart. "But this isn't about your work anymore, Ethan," Leila said softly, her voice steady with newfound conviction. "This is about us, and a baby. Whether we like it or not, our lives are now connected. And no matter how much you try to push me away, I'm not going anywhere. I just need to know. Are you willing to try?" Ethan stared at her for a long moment, his brow furrowed as if he were weighing every word. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice quieter. "I don't know what that would look like, but I'm willing to try, Leila. For the baby, For you. I'll do whatever it takes, even if I don't have the answers right now. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting him to say that. She had braced herself for the worst. But this was different. He was willing to try. He was willing to meet her halfway. A moment of silence passed between them as they both let the weight of the conversation sink in. Leila found herself blinking back the tears she hadn't even realized had begun to form. The relief felt almost too much to bear. She wasn't in this alone anymore. I'm not going to ask you to be a perfect father, Leila continued, her voice breaking the silence, but I'm asking you to be involved, in whatever way you can handle. I'm doing this for the baby, but I'm also doing this for us. This is our chance to build something. Something real. I don't know where we're going, but I want to try. Ethan nodded, his jaw tightening as if he were bracing for the unknown. All right, we'll try. But we'll do it together, not as strangers, not as business partners, as parents. Leila smiled, the tension in her chest easing for the first time in what felt like forever. They had a long road ahead of them, but for the first time she felt like she wasn't walking it alone. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Leila's days were filled with doctor appointments, growing morning sickness, and trying to keep her life together. The weight of the pregnancy, of everything that had changed, was heavy on her shoulders. But there was a shift. Ethan had stepped up in ways she didn't expect. He checked in on her, asking how the pregnancy was going, arranging medical appointments, and even making sure she had everything she needed. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was progress. Still, they were far from a typical family, and the tension between them lingered. Every time she saw Ethan, there was a reminder of how little they knew each other. They were strangers, still figuring out how to coexist in this new reality. But at least they were trying. One evening, after yet another long day of trying to juggle her work and the pregnancy, Leila found herself sitting in a cozy cafe near her apartment. She hadn't seen Ethan for a few days, and for some reason, that left her feeling uneasy. It was as if, despite the progress they'd made, there was still a distance between them that neither of them knew how to bridge. Her phone buzzed, and her heart leaped when she saw Ethan's name flash across the screen. Leila, I've been thinking. How about we talk tomorrow? There's a lot to figure out. Let's meet up and take this seriously. Let's talk about where we go from here. Ethan. Leila exhaled slowly, her fingers hovering over the screen. It was a simple message, but it spoke volumes. Ethan wasn't running anymore. He was reaching out, wanting to take responsibility. She felt the smallest bit of hope stir within her chest. Could they really make this work? The following day, they met at the same cafe. Ethan was already there, sitting at a small corner table, his back straight, eyes fixed on his phone, looking every bit the businessman he was. But when he saw her, his expression softened just slightly. Leila, he greeted, standing up to pull out a chair for her. Thanks for coming. Leila sat down, feeling the usual nerves rise in her chest. Of course, she said. You wanted to talk. Ethan nodded, taking a deep breath before speaking. I've been thinking about this whole situation. I know we've taken some steps, but there's a lot I need to sort out. I don't want to make any more promises I can't keep. But I want to be a father, I want to be there. I'm just not sure what that looks like yet. Leila took in his words, unsure if they were enough, but understanding that he was trying. That was what mattered, wasn't it? "Let's figure it out, Ethan," she said quietly, her heart swelling with a strange mixture of uncertainty and hope. "Step by step. We don't have to have it all figured out now. But I need to know that you're in this, that we're both in this." He nodded, the weight of his promise settling between them. "I'm in, Leila. I'm here, and I'll keep showing up, for the baby and for you." The conversation that followed wasn't easy. They talked about their future, about co-parenting, about the challenges they'd face. But for the first time it felt real. Not perfect, not smooth, but real. Leila had no idea where this journey would take her or Ethan. But one thing was clear. They were going to try, together. Leila woke up to the soft hum of her alarm, the early morning light filtering through the blinds, casting pale shadows across the room. Her stomach churned, the persistent nausea that had been with her for weeks. Now a constant reminder that this wasn't a passing phase, this was her new reality. She was pregnant, with twins. The weight of it hit her every morning, like a cold wave that refused to break. She rubbed her eyes, the exhaustion of the past few months weighing down on her like a heavy blanket. But today was different. Today was the day she had agreed to meet Ethan. After their last conversation at the cafe, there had been no clear resolution, but the tension between them had lessened. Ethan had reached out, and they had set a tentative plan to meet and talk more seriously about their situation. He was still figuring out what he wanted to do, but so was she. Leila stood up from the bed, her body feeling heavier with each movement. It wasn't just the pregnancy. It was everything. The uncertainty, the pressure, the responsibility that now came with her every decision. She hadn't expected to be here. She hadn't expected any of this. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. Ethan. "Leila, I know it's been a bit chaotic, but are you still up for meeting today? I think it's time we get things sorted." "I'll be free at noon if that works for you." The message was simple, but her heart skipped a beat. For the first time, Ethan seemed like he was taking control of the situation. He wasn't asking if she was okay. He wasn't leaving her to figure it out alone. He was ready to take responsibility, and that, more than anything, gave her a small flicker of hope. She typed back quickly, "Leila, noon works for me. Where should we meet?" A few minutes later, she received his reply. "Ethan, how about the cafe we met last time? I think it's time we talk about everything. No distractions." It was a simple place, but it held weight now. This wasn't just coffee anymore. This was the conversation that could change the course of both of their lives. By noon, Leila had arrived at the cafe a little early, her nerves buzzing under the surface. She hadn't seen Ethan in a few weeks, and the anticipation of this meeting was palpable. As she walked through the door, she spotted him almost immediately. He was sitting at the same corner table, his posture slightly more relaxed than the first time they'd met. His face was still guarded, but there was something about the way he looked at her that told her he was ready. "Leila," he greeted, standing up to pull out the chair for her. She sat down, giving him a small smile. "Ethan," she replied. Her voice felt unsteady, though she tried to keep it calm. "It's good to see you again." He nodded, his eyes not leaving hers. "I've been thinking a lot about our situation, about everything." Leila waited for him to continue. She could feel the heavy weight of what was to come. "I know this hasn't been easy," Ethan said, leaning forward, his hands clasped on the table. "I've spent my whole life thinking I'd never be in a situation like this. Never in a million years did I think I'd be sitting here, talking about being a father. But here we are." Leila's heart clenched at the vulnerability in his voice. This wasn't the Ethan she'd met that night, the powerful businessman who seemed to have everything under control. This Ethan was different, raw, human. "I've been thinking about it too," Leila said, her voice softer now. "About what kind of future we're building, or what kind of future we want for our child." Ethan's expression was unreadable as he took a deep breath, the weight of the conversation settling in. "I've spent the past few weeks trying to figure out what that looks like. I know I can't do this alone, and I don't want to. I want to be there for you, Leila, for the baby, for the future we have to create." Leila blinked back, the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She hadn't expected him to say that. She had expected more distance, more hesitation. But this felt real. "I don't know what I'm doing," Ethan continued, his voice more vulnerable now. "I've never done anything like this, but I want to be a father, Leila. I want to try." The words hung in the air between them. Leila didn't know what to say. She had no idea what this meant for them, but for the first time, she felt like they might have a chance. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers," Leila said, her voice steadying. "I don't have them either, but I need to know that you're willing to be involved, that we're in this together." Ethan's gaze softened, his jaw tightening as he nodded. "We're in this together. I can't promise that it'll be easy, but I'm not going anywhere, and I'm ready to take responsibility." Leila could feel the lump in her throat as she looked at him. It wasn't a perfect promise, but it was enough. It was more than she had expected. "So what now?" she asked, the question almost feeling like an afterthought. But it was the question that mattered the most. What came next for them? What kind of relationship could they build with the foundation of a child between them? "We take it one step at a time," Ethan replied, his voice firm but gentle. "But we take those steps together. I want to be there for the baby, for you, and I'll do whatever it takes." The weight of his words settled between them, heavy with the unspoken promise of what could be. It wasn't going to be easy, but maybe, just maybe, they could figure it out. Leila's heart felt a little lighter now, though she knew the journey was far from over. This wasn't a fairy tale. This wasn't some simple solution to their problems. But it was a start, and that was enough. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. They talked logistics, doctor's appointments, baby names, future plans. They talked about their expectations, though neither of them had a clear idea of what the future held. But they were talking, and for the first time it felt like they were really seeing each other. Not just as two people caught in a whirlwind, but as two people trying to build something real. As they stood up to leave, Ethan gave her a small smile, his eyes still searching hers. "I'll take care of the hospital bills, and I'll be there for the appointments. Whatever you need." Leila nodded, feeling the unexpected weight of gratitude in her chest. "Thank you," she said quietly. Ethan opened the door for her, stepping aside to let her pass. "Let's take this one step at a time, Leila," he said, his voice softer now. "We'll figure it out." And for the first time since everything had started, Leila felt like maybe, just maybe, they could. The next few weeks passed by in a whirlwind of appointments, preparations, and new, unspoken rules between Leila and Ethan. It was an uncharted territory, both exhilarating and terrifying. They were slowly beginning to understand what it meant to co-parent, although the lines between their relationship remained blurred. They weren't quite friends, not yet. And yet, there was an undeniable sense of duty between them now. Duty to the life growing inside her and to each other, whether they liked it or not. Leila had learned a lot about Ethan during their time together, things she never would have guessed from their initial meeting at the cafe. He was meticulous, disciplined, and almost obsessively focused on his work. But there was another side to him that started to emerge. A gentleness she hadn't expected. At the first ultrasound, when the doctor confirmed that she was carrying twins, he had looked at the screen with awe, his fingers tapping restlessly on the armrest, as if unsure of how to process what was happening. "Twins," Ethan had whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. "Are you sure?" The doctor had nodded. "It's definitely twins. Congratulations." And for the first time, Leila had seen him, really seen him, vulnerable. His stern exterior, usually unshakable, was momentarily gone. She didn't know if it was the fact that they were expecting 2 babies, or if it was something deeper. But in that moment, she saw the quiet terror in his eyes. "I didn't know you were this nervous," she had teased lightly, trying to ease the tension. "I didn't know I could be," Ethan had replied, his voice quieter now, almost reflective. Since then, their communication had improved. He reached out more, asking how she was feeling, what she needed. But he still kept his distance emotionally. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And for her part, Leila was learning to let go of the old, angry parts of herself that had held on to resentment. She wasn't prepared to trust him completely, but she wasn't prepared to walk away either. They were in this together, and whether she liked it or not, that meant something. The real complication began when Ethan suggested, after much deliberation, that they meet his family. It happened one evening when they were having dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant near her apartment. Leila had just finished telling him about her latest art project, a series of abstract cityscapes she was working on for a local gallery, when Ethan's voice had cut through her excitement. "I think it's time you met my family." Leila froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Your family?" Ethan was looking at her, his expression unreadable. But there was a hint of something deeper behind his eyes, almost like hesitation. "Yeah, I know this is all moving fast, but, well, they're going to know eventually. You can't keep something like this a secret forever." Leila felt the blood rush to her cheeks. The thought of meeting Ethan's family sent an immediate wave of anxiety through her. What if they didn't like her? What if they looked at her, the struggling artist with no real future, and judged her for being pregnant with their son's child? The insecurities she had worked so hard to suppress began to rise to the surface, threatening to overtake her. I don't know if I'm ready for that, she admitted quietly, lowering her fork. What if they don't approve of me? Of this? Ethan's face softened, and he reached across the table, placing a hand over hers. Leila, you don't have to impress them. This isn't about them. This is about us. About the baby. I want them to understand that you're important to me, and you're important to our child. This isn't something that can be ignored. She swallowed hard, torn between wanting to protect herself and her growing family, and her desire to understand where Ethan was coming from. Do you think they'll accept me? I don't know, Ethan admitted, his voice surprisingly candid. But they have to try. They'll have to accept that this is real, that you and the baby are a part of my life now, whether they like it or not. Leila nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. Okay, I'll meet them, but only on one condition. What's that? He asked, his eyebrows rising in amusement. That you're with me through it all. No more letting them talk down to me. No more pretending this is just some mistake. I need you there. For me. Ethan's expression turned serious, and he squeezed her hand. I'm with you, Leila. I won't let anyone make you feel less than. A week later, they stood in front of a grand, imposing house nestled in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city. The Mitchell family home, Ethan had explained to her, was a sprawling mansion, a place that had never truly felt like home to him. He had grown up in this place, surrounded by wealth, but often neglected emotionally. His parents had never been particularly involved in his personal life, and now, as they approached the front door, the weight of everything, his family, their expectations, their history, pressed on his chest. You sure you're ready for this? Ethan asked quietly, glancing at her as they walked up the marble steps. Leila couldn't hide the nerves she was feeling. I don't think I'll ever be ready, but I don't have a choice. We're doing this for the baby. Ethan nodded, and just before he rang the doorbell, he turned to her one last time. No matter what happens, I've got your back. You're not alone in this. Leila smiled at him, grateful for his reassurance, even if her heart was still racing. When the door opened, a tall woman with sharp, assessing eyes stood before them. She was impeccably dressed in a cream-colored suit, her silver hair styled into a perfect updo. This, Leila realized, was Ethan's mother. Ethan, she said, her voice cool and controlled as she air-kissed his cheek. Her eyes flicked over to Leila, her gaze sharp, as though she were taking inventory of every inch of Leila's appearance. This is Leila, Ethan introduced her, his voice slightly firmer than usual, the mother of my child. The words landed like a slap in the silence that followed. Leila could feel the weight of them, the sharpness of his mother's gaze, as though she were already dissecting every piece of their situation. You're the one. Victoria Mitchell's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. The one who's pregnant with my son's child. Leila took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. Yes, Mrs. Mitchell, I'm the one. Ethan's mother smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Well then come in, let's have dinner. Your father is waiting. Dinner was, as expected, tense. The conversation was stiff, full of formalities and half-hidden judgments. Victoria Mitchell was cold, her sharp eyes scanning every word and movement, as if she were taking notes on Leila's every flaw. Richard Mitchell, Ethan's father, said little. He was an older man, refined and elegant, but detached in a way that made Leila feel as though she were on display. Victoria's questions were pointed and intrusive, touching on Leila's background, her career, her financial situation. It was clear she was trying to assess Leila's worth, whether she was worthy of her son, worthy of being part of their world. As the night went on, Leila couldn't help but feel small in their presence. But she wasn't going to back down. Not for them. Not for anyone. Ethan, as promised, stood by her side. He defended her when his mother's words became too cutting, and his eyes never left her, as if to remind her that they were in this together. But by the end of the evening, Leila was exhausted. The questions had become too much, the judgments too real. As they walked out of the house, Ethan pulled her close, his hand resting on her back. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft now, more private. Leila nodded, though her heart was heavy. "I think I'll be okay, but I'm not sure I'm ready to do that again anytime soon." Ethan smiled faintly, his hand squeezing her shoulder. "I know, but we made it through, and we'll make it through anything else, together." The days following that tense dinner at Ethan's family home felt like a blur of emotions. Leila had done her best to process everything, but the sting of Victoria Mitchell's coldness lingered in her mind. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the way Victoria had sized her up, the sharpness in her gaze that made her feel like she didn't belong. Ethan had tried to reassure her in the days after the dinner, but it was clear that the night had shaken him too. She could see it in the way he hesitated before calling his parents, or how he took longer than usual to return messages. The coldness of his family's reception had unsettled him in ways he didn't openly admit, but Leila could tell. The following weekend, Ethan suggested they take a break from all the family drama. "Why don't we get out of the city for a bit?" he asked one evening. "Maybe take a weekend trip. Just the two of us. We don't have to deal with anyone else for a while." The idea sounded tempting. After everything, after the confrontation with his mother, the awkwardness that followed, Leila was desperate for some space, away from the pressure and the eyes of others. She didn't realize just how much she needed the break until the idea of getting away from it all filled her with a sense of relief. They rented a small cabin by a lake, far away from the hustle of Seattle. It was a quiet, peaceful place, surrounded by trees and the soft sounds of nature. For the first time in weeks, Leila felt like she could breathe again. The first morning there, Leila woke up early, the sun just beginning to rise over the lake. She stepped outside, wrapped in a cozy sweater, and sat on the porch, her eyes following the mist rising off the water. She took in a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs, and for a brief moment, she felt calm. There was no pressure here, no judgment, just the sound of birds and the quiet of the world waking up. Ethan joined her shortly after, still looking groggy but with a soft smile on his face as he handed her a cup of hot coffee. "I thought you might need this," he said, sitting beside her on the porch swing. Leila took the cup from him gratefully, the warmth of the coffee seeping through her cold fingers. "Thank you. This place is, beautiful." "Yeah, it is," Ethan agreed, his gaze softening as he looked out over the water. I thought it might be nice for us to have some time to ourselves, without all the family stuff, without all the pressure. Leila nodded, silently thankful for the chance to just be here. It's nice, really nice. For a moment, they just sat there in comfortable silence, letting the world continue around them. But eventually, Leila couldn't help herself. The thoughts she'd been trying to suppress crept into her mind again. Ethan, she began, her voice quiet, about your family. He looked over at her, his expression serious, but not angry. You don't have to worry about them, Leila. I know that dinner was odd. And I know my mother. She wasn't exactly welcoming. But I need you to know something. I don't care what they think about you. I care about what we're building together. Leila felt a wave of emotion wash over her, a mixture of relief and guilt. She had been so consumed with the idea of being accepted by his family that she had forgotten why they were even here in the first place. They were building something together, something real, and that was all that mattered. I care about you, Ethan, Leila said, her voice steady now, but still filled with the emotion she couldn't quite put into words. And I care about what we're doing here. With the baby, with everything. But I don't want to keep fighting with your family. I don't want to be constantly reminded that I don't belong. Ethan reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a reassuring gesture. I understand, Leila, but we're not here to win their approval. We're here to build a life together. That's what matters. You and me. And the baby. Leila took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling as she let his words sink in. She had to let go of the need for validation. Ethan had made it clear that he wanted her in his life. That was enough. She was enough. I just wish they could see that, she said softly, more to herself than to him. I wish they could understand that this is real. That we're not just some fling or mistake. Ethan squeezed her hand. You're not a mistake, Leila. And neither is the baby. We're not going anywhere. Leila smiled faintly, feeling the sincerity in his words. I'm glad to hear that. They spent the rest of the morning and early afternoon walking around the cabin, talking about everything and nothing. For the first time in a long while, Leila felt light. They didn't have to talk about the baby or the future. They just talked. About music, movies, their favorite books, and all the things that had once brought them together. By the time the afternoon rolled around, they were both sitting on the dock, their legs dangling over the edge as they looked out over the water. I needed this, Leila said, her voice a little softer now. I didn't realize how much I needed it until we got here. Ethan leaned back on his elbows, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. We needed this. I've been thinking about a lot of things lately. About my family. About you. About the future. But I haven't really taken the time to just breathe. Just enjoy the moment. Leila turned to look at him, her heart swelling with something she couldn't quite define. I'm glad we're doing this, Ethan. I think we can make this work. His gaze met hers, and for the first time she saw something different in his eyes. Not fear. Not hesitation. Just understanding. We'll make it work, Leila, he said, his voice steady and full of certainty. We'll figure it out. Together. By the time they returned to Seattle, there was a shift between them. The weekend had given them space to breathe, but it had also given them the chance to connect on a deeper level. The uncertainty hadn't disappeared, but they were both more willing to face it head on. They were in this together, and that was enough for now. However, as they returned to their busy lives and the reality of their situation, one thing became clear. Ethan's family wasn't going to just fade into the background. Victoria Mitchell's disapproval still loomed over them, and it was only a matter of time before they would have to face her again. Leila wasn't sure if she was ready for that, but she knew one thing. Ethan was willing to fight for her, and for the baby. And that gave her more courage than she'd ever had before. Leila stood in front of the mirror, her hand resting lightly on the growing curve of her belly. She'd passed the halfway point of her pregnancy, and it seemed as though everything was changing faster than she could keep up. The twins were growing, her body was changing, and the weight of responsibility was starting to press on her chest in ways she hadn't expected. Despite the peace she'd felt in the cabin with Ethan, the world she was returning to in Seattle seemed to have a different, heavier feel to it. She couldn't ignore the fact that they had been making progress. Ethan had been doing his part, reaching out to her more than he ever had before. But despite everything, there was still something nagging at her. The pieces of their relationship, the fragments of their lives that they were trying to fit together, still didn't seem to quite line up. She felt as though they were always just one step behind, always trying to catch up to something they could barely define. It had been a week since they returned from their trip, and Ethan hadn't brought up his family again. Leila had tried to push the worry out of her mind, telling herself that things were going well. But there was still a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling of impending tension. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. "Ethan, can we talk tonight? About some things? I know it's been a bit, but I think we need to discuss the future, especially with the baby coming." Leila read the message twice. The future. They had been talking around it, avoiding the big conversations that would ultimately shape everything. She took a deep breath before typing a response. "Leila. Yeah, tonight works. I'll be home by 6. She set the phone down on the counter, staring at her reflection for a moment longer. She had to admit, she was nervous. Every time they had these talks, it felt like they were walking a tightrope. No matter how many steps forward they took, the balance between them was precarious. And with the twins on the way, everything was about to change again. Later that evening, Leila was sitting on the couch, going through some art portfolio submissions for a new project, when she heard the sound of the door opening. Ethan stepped inside, looking as collected as always, though his face carried a certain weight that told Leila he had something on his mind. "Hey," he said, giving her a small smile. "I've been thinking a lot about what we need to do, about the future." Leila set the papers down and patted the seat beside her. "Come sit. I'm guessing you want to talk about the family situation again." Ethan nodded, walking over and sitting down beside her. His eyes were serious now, his brows furrowed as though he were deep in thought. "Yeah, I've been thinking about it. My mum called me today. She wants to meet with us again. She wants to talk about the baby." Leila's stomach tightened at the mention of Victoria. She had tried to put the woman's cold reception out of her mind, but hearing her name again brought it all rushing back, The biting comments, the cold smiles, the way she'd made Leila feel like she didn't belong. "What does she want to say?" Leila asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "She wants to discuss plans, I guess. She said she has some ideas for how we should handle things. I know she's trying to control everything, and I know it's not what you want, but she's my mother, so, Leila. Leila felt the words sting, the familiar ache of feeling out of place creeping back in. "I know," she said quietly. "I know she's your mother. But I can't just keep pretending she's going to suddenly accept me, or that this baby is going to fit into her perfect little world." Ethan's gaze softened, and he reached for her hand. "I don't want to make you feel like you're being pushed around, but this is complicated, and I want to handle it the right way, for the baby, for us." Leila pulled her hand back gently, the unease in her chest starting to rise. "You keep saying that, but we've been handling everything your way, Ethan. You've been trying to make this work with your family, trying to fit me into their mold. But that's not my world, and I'm starting to feel like I don't even have a say in it." Ethan sat back, his jaw tightening. "That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to make sure everything works for everyone. You, me, the baby. I'm not trying to make you feel like you don't matter." Leila's chest tightened with frustration. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But every time they went around in circles like this, it felt like they were getting further apart. "I don't need your family's approval, Ethan," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "What I need is for you to stand by me. To stand by us. I'm not asking for anything more than that." Ethan looked at her, his face filled with uncertainty. "I'm standing by you, Leila. I'm doing my best. But this isn't just about us anymore. We're bringing a child into this world, and I want to make sure we're doing the right thing." Leila looked away, trying to calm the storm of emotions in her chest. She knew he was trying. But the more they spoke about the future, the more she realized how little they understood each other. Ethan was still caught between his family's expectations and his growing feelings for her. And she? She was caught between a desire for independence and the harsh reality of the situation. "I think we need to figure out what we want, Ethan. What we want, not what anyone else wants," Leila said, her voice steady now, though the hurt still lingered. "And I need to know if you're with me on this. No more distractions. No more family drama, just us." Ethan stared at her for a long moment, and for the first time, Leila felt like maybe, just maybe, they were on the same page. "I'm with you," he said quietly. "I just don't want to screw this up. For you. For the baby. For us." Leila nodded, feeling a weight lift slightly off her shoulders. She didn't have all the answers, but maybe, just maybe, they could figure this out together. The next morning, Leila woke up with a newfound sense of clarity. Their conversation last night had opened her eyes to something she hadn't fully realized until now. She wasn't just waiting for Ethan to make a decision about their future. She needed to make decisions for herself too. As she sat on the couch, sipping her coffee, her mind wandered to the idea of family. What it meant, what it could look like for her and the twins. She didn't have to fit into anyone's expectations. She just needed to create a space where she, Ethan, and the babies could thrive. Whatever that looked like, Leila couldn't shake the conversation from the night before. The air in the apartment felt different now, more charged, as though the walls themselves were holding the weight of everything that had been said. Ethan had promised that he was with her. He had promised that they would figure this out together. But Leila still wasn't sure what that meant in practice. What would their life look like once the babies were born? What kind of future could they build when everything felt so uncertain? She had always prided herself on being independent. She had fought so hard to carve out her own space in the world, in her career. And now she had to face the truth. No matter how hard she tried to push back against it, her life was intertwined with Ethan's. There was no escaping that now. And she had to admit, she wasn't entirely sure how to navigate this new dynamic. Leila ran her fingers through her hair as she stared out the window at the busy streets of Seattle below. She could hear the faint hum of the city, the clattering of trains, the murmur of pedestrians walking by. The life outside felt so far removed from what she was going through, yet at the same time, it was a reminder of everything that was waiting for her, for them. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Ethan. Ethan. I've been thinking a lot about everything we talked about. I think we should start planning for the future. Not just with the baby, but with us. Let's make some decisions. Can we meet tonight? The simplicity of the message struck her. It was a direct invitation, one that acknowledged the heavy weight of the conversation they'd been avoiding. Leila felt a strange sense of calm come over her. This was the moment they needed to define their future. She needed to stop wondering what might be and start thinking about what she wanted. What they both wanted. Leila, tonight works. I'll be home by 7. That evening, when Ethan arrived, Leila had already prepared a light dinner, something simple, though she couldn't deny the underlying nervousness that buzzed in her stomach. She had spent the last few hours thinking about how she wanted to approach this conversation. The truth was, they had both been avoiding the hard talk for too long. Now, they had no choice but to confront it. Ethan walked in, his expression calm but focused. I'm sorry I haven't been more clear about everything, he began as he took a seat across from her at the kitchen table. I've been caught up in everything with my family, and I know that hasn't made things any easier on you. I haven't been present in the way you deserve. Leila looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. Ethan wasn't usually one to openly express his vulnerabilities. And yet, here he was, acknowledging the gap between them. It was a start. I appreciate you saying that, she replied. Her tone soft but firm. But the truth is, I've been feeling a little lost too. I don't want to keep waiting for things to just magically fall into place. We need to talk about what's next. About what kind of life we want for ourselves. For the babies. Ethan nodded, his eyes steady as he met her gaze. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And I know I haven't been perfect. But I'm ready to do whatever it takes. I'm ready to be here for you, for the babies, and I think it's time we stop letting the past dictate our future. Leila's heart beat a little faster at his words. It felt like a weight was lifting off her shoulders. But she knew they still had a long road ahead of them. There were so many things they needed to figure out. But how do we even start? She asked, the question hanging in the air between them. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. We start by being honest, by creating a plan together. I've been so focused on making sure I take care of everything that I haven't asked you what you need, what you want. We have to build this future together. No more doing it alone. Leila exhaled slowly, her mind racing. Okay, she said, her voice quiet but determined. First things first, I want to be in control of my own life. I'm not looking to be some stay-at-home mom. I want to work. I want to keep building my career. I want to show our kids that I'm capable, that we can do this on our own terms. Ethan didn't hesitate. I know you can, and I respect that, Leila. I don't want to take that away from you. Whatever you need to feel like you're still in control of your future, I'm on board. But we also need to talk about how we're going to share the responsibilities, how we're going to divide our time between the kids and our work. Leila felt her shoulders relax at his words. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a starting point. A real partnership. They spent the next hour discussing their plans, how they would divide parenting duties, how they would manage their careers and still make time for each other. The conversation wasn't easy, and at times it felt overwhelming, but it was also necessary. They both knew it. We're not going to have all the answers, Ethan said, his voice calm. But we're going to figure it out together. Leila smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a start, and that was all she could ask for. The next day, they took the first step toward their future. Ethan and Leila sat down with a financial planner, discussed childcare, and mapped out their priorities. It wasn't glamorous or easy, but it was real. They were making decisions, moving forward. And for the first time in a long while, Leila felt like she wasn't doing it alone. As they walked out of the financial planner's office, Ethan turned to her, his eyes soft. How do you feel? He asked. Leila looked up at him, a quiet smile playing on her lips. I feel like we're actually doing this, like we're figuring it out. Ethan grinned back, the tension between them easing for the first time in weeks. Yeah, we are. And for the first time, Leila truly believed that they could build something together. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be theirs, and that was all that mattered. The first snow of the season arrived quietly, like a soft blanket covering everything in its path. It was late December now, and the days seemed to have gotten shorter as they all prepared for the arrival of the twins. Leila and Ethan had spent the past several months building their lives around this new reality. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt, moments of uncertainty, but it was real. And in its own way, it was beginning to feel like home. Leila stood by the window of their apartment, her hands resting lightly on her belly. She watched as the snowflakes drifted down, collecting in little piles on the street below. She had never really liked winter. But now, as the baby's due date approached, there was something calming about the quiet beauty of it all. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Ethan, I'll be home soon. Can't wait to see you. The twins are going to change everything. I'm so ready for this. Leila smiled softly at the message, her heart swelling with a mix of love and anticipation. They had come so far from where they started, from that initial shock of the pregnancy to now, with everything they had planned together. It hadn't been easy, but nothing worth having ever was. She glanced at the clock. Ethan would be home soon, and then they would go to the hospital. It was time. The trip to the hospital felt surreal. Leila had been to countless doctor appointments in the past months. But this was different. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The moment their lives would change forever. Ethan was by her side, his hand firmly holding hers, just like he had promised. He had been with her every step of the way, through the tough conversations, the uncertainty, and now, through the final stages of her pregnancy. For the first time, as they walked into the hospital together, she felt the weight of everything they had built. They weren't just about to become parents, they were becoming a family. They checked into the maternity ward, and within the hour, Leila was settled into a room, hooked up to the monitors. Ethan stayed close, his presence reassuring and steady as ever. He didn't look at his phone, didn't look anywhere but at Leila. His face was calm, but she could see the excitement building in his eyes. "I'm nervous," Leila admitted, her voice soft. "But I'm excited too. I can't believe this is happening." Ethan squeezed her hand tighter. "We've made it through a lot already, Leila. I know we're going to get through this too, together." Leila looked up at him, searching his face for something. There was no doubt in her heart anymore. No more second guessing. This was the man she was building her future with. This was their family. And no matter what happened next, she was ready. Hours later, after what seemed like an eternity of waiting, the twins finally arrived. The pain and exhaustion melted away in an instant when Leila heard their cries. Ethan stood beside her, his hand gripping hers as they both looked down at the two tiny faces in their arms. Their twins. Tears filled Leila's eyes as she held the babies. Two perfect little lives that were now entirely their responsibility. Ethan's face was full of wonder as he gazed at them. There were no words, just a shared understanding in the way they looked at each other. This was it. This was their new beginning. "I can't believe they're here," Leila whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "They're perfect," Ethan replied, his voice equally quiet, filled with awe. Leila smiled through her tears. The hospital room felt oddly peaceful now, as if everything had aligned in this one moment. She and Ethan were no longer two people trying to figure it all out. They were a family. The family they had built from the ground up, despite all the obstacles, despite the uncertainties. And the future, though still uncertain, was now something they would face together. A few days later, they were back in their apartment, settling in with their newborns. The early days were filled with exhaustion and wonder. The kind of quiet chaos that only new parents could truly understand. Leila often found herself staring at the twins, marveling at how much love she could feel for two tiny humans who had only just entered the world. Ethan too was finding his footing. He was more present now than ever before, taking shifts with her at night and learning how to soothe the babies when they cried. The distance between them had closed, and what was once a tentative partnership was now something solid. "Can I talk to you about something?" Ethan asked one night, after they'd gotten the twins to sleep. He was sitting on the couch beside her, looking slightly nervous. "Of course," Leila said, shifting to face him. "What's on your mind?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "I've been thinking about us, about our future." Leila raised an eyebrow, unsure of where he was going with this. "What do you mean?" I know we've talked about co-parenting and figuring things out, he began, looking her straight in the eye. But I want more than that, Leila. I want us to be a real family. Not just for the twins, but for ourselves. I want us to have a future together, one where we're not just parents, but partners in every sense of the word. I don't want to just raise these kids with you. I want to build a life with you. Leila's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had never expected this. Not so soon. They had come so far already, but this was something else entirely. You mean you want to get married? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, his eyes softening with sincerity. I do. I love you, Leila, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? Tears welled up in Leila's eyes as she looked at him, the overwhelming emotions of the past few months crashing over her in one moment. She had never expected this, but now that it was here, it felt like the only natural next step. Yes, she whispered, her voice shaking. Yes, I will. Ethan's face lit up with relief and joy as he took her hand in his. He leaned forward, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. I promise you, Leila, we're in this together, always. And in that moment, Leila knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family. Together. The days and months that followed were filled with laughter and challenges. The twins grew and so did their relationship. They learned how to juggle their new roles as parents and partners, navigating the highs and lows of family life. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. And as Christmas rolled around once again, they found themselves sitting together. The twins asleep in their cribs, the warmth of the fire crackling in the background. Leila looked over at Ethan, her heart full. It had been a year since everything had changed. And while the road had been rocky, it had brought them to this moment. One filled with hope, love, and a future that was theirs to build. We made it, she whispered, more to herself than to Ethan. We sure did, Ethan replied, pulling her close. And I wouldn't have it any other way. As the snow fell gently outside, Leila closed her eyes, knowing that the best was yet to come. The future was theirs to create, and together they would make it everything they had ever dreamed of. Thank you for letting me take you through Leila and Ethan's journey. I hope you enjoyed the story. Let us know in the comments.